Mom, you're not going to believe this. Noah's voice cut through the quiet of the house, adrenaline-fueled. There's a new kid at school. He looks exactly like us. Zoride's stomach flipped. The room seemed to shrink around her, the walls pressing in. He's got the same cheekbones, same eyes. Lily's voice wavered, both excited and confused. His name's Sterling. I swear, it's like a mirror. Her heart dropped. Sterling. That name. That face. Her breath caught. She couldn't say it, but she knew. It was him. A knock at the door, hard and sharp. She froze, holding her breath. Her eyes darted to the photo in Noah's hand. Vane. No. This wasn't real. It couldn't be. What did you say his last name was? Her voice barely more than a whisper. Noah didn't notice her panic. He turned the screen toward her, oblivious. Vane. Isn't that crazy? Zoride's pulse throbbed in her throat. Everything inside her screamed to look away, but she couldn't. She wasn't ready for this. The door knocked again. Mom, are you okay? She blinked. It's nothing, honey. I'll be right there. But she knew. She understood. Arthur's son. What if the life she worked so hard to forget had just walked back into her world? Welcome back, my beautiful family and friends. I've missed you all so much. It's been a tough ride with some technical issues, but by God's grace, we're getting everything back on track. Thank you for sticking with me. Your support means everything. Before we begin, I want to say a little prayer over everyone watching, especially the women. To the women, may God strengthen you, comfort you, and fill your heart with peace and favor. To the men, may God guide you, bless your effort, and give you wisdom in all you do. And may God's protection rest on every single one of you. Amen. If you're ready for today's story, hit subscribe and tell me in the comments where you're watching from. My USA and UK family, I see you. And please watch till the end, because tomorrow I'll be dropping another story you wouldn't want to miss. Now, let's get into the story. Zoride lay wide awake, her eyes staring at the ceiling. The room was still, but the thoughts racing through her mind kept her from finding any peace. The image of Noah and Lily's faces, so excited and innocent, had twisted into something sharp and unfamiliar. Sterling Vane. She repeated the name over and over in her mind, a slow burn of recognition creeping through her veins. The weight of the moment hit her like a freight train. Sterling Vane, the son of Arthur. After all these years, after everything she'd buried, here it was, staring her in the face. His son. The clock ticked on the bedside table. It was after midnight, and she still couldn't shake the dread that clung to her. She rolled over, the sheets tangled around her legs, but sleep wouldn't come. She reached for her phone, her fingers trembling as she typed the name into the search bar, Sterling Vane. The results flooded her screen in an instant. VaneTech heir, son of Arthur Vane and Josephine Vane. Beverly Hills. It was him. She wasn't crazy. The boy at school, the one who looked exactly like Noah and Lily, was his son. Her heart thudded against her chest. She felt the air in the room tighten, her throat constricting with the same fear she'd buried for over a decade. Arthur. She clicked on the first link and scrolled through the bio that laid it all out. Arthur's company, VaneTech, had become a multi-billion-dollar empire, changing the world with its innovations in artificial intelligence and sustainable technologies. The articles painted a picture of success, of power, but to her, it was a stark reminder of everything she and her sons had been shut out of. Her fingers hovered over the screen. She clicked on a photo, her breath catching as Arthur's face filled the screen. He hadn't changed much. Older, sharper, but those eyes still carried the same arrogance, the same distance, the same emptiness. Her chest tightened. She clicked on another article, a recent interview from the Wall Street Journal about his growing influence in the tech world. The words blurred together as her mind raced. Why now? Why, after all these years, had Arthur's world collided with hers again? She closed her eyes, leaning back against the pillow, trying to quiet the storm in her mind. The memories came flooding back, sharp and painful, like shards of glass piercing her thoughts. The last conversation she had with him. Arthur stood in her tiny apartment, his hands shaking slightly as he gripped the edge of the counter. He was wearing a crisp suit, the same confident, arrogant look in his eyes. The same man who had swept her off her feet, now standing before her. A man broken by the weight of a future he couldn't embrace. "I can't do this, Zoride," he had said, his voice low, almost pleading. "I can't build an empire with a family tied to my ankles." Her heart had dropped in that moment. The words sliced through her like a knife. She had thought he was joking at first, but the look in his eyes, the fear, the coldness, told her everything she needed to know. He wasn't joking. Arthur wasn't ready to be a father. He wasn't ready to put his career on hold. And the worst part? He had made that choice without even considering her or their future. I thought we could make it work," he had whispered, avoiding her gaze. "But not now. Not with everything I have on the line." Zoride had wanted to scream, to beg him to stay. But she had done the only thing that made sense. She had walked away. "I'm not going to wait around for you to decide, Arthur," she had said, her voice trembling but determined. "I'm not going to let you drag us through your ambition. I'll do this on my own." And she had. She had left without another word, no forwarding address, no final conversation. She had turned her back on the man who was supposed to be her partner, the man who had walked away from their future, the man who had walked away from their children. Zoride wiped a tear from her cheek, shaking her head. She hadn't thought about that conversation in years. She had done her best to forget it, to bury it. But now, with Arthur's son standing right in front of her in the form of Sterling, the ghosts of the past had returned with a vengeance. She couldn't help but feel the bitterness rise in her throat. Her mind flashed to the countless late nights, the missed school events, the struggles to pay bills, to stretch the small paycheck from her architectural projects. She had worked harder than anyone to give Noah and Lily the life they deserved. She'd given them everything, every ounce of herself, while Arthur had built his empire, leaving her to clean up the mess he had made of their lives. She didn't regret raising her sons alone. She'd never regret them. But she couldn't ignore the ache in her chest, the resentment that bubbled to the surface when she thought about Arthur's absence. They deserved more than that. More than him. More than the hollow promise of someday. And now, after all these years, he was back. Only now, it wasn't about them. It was about his other son. Her eyes drifted back to the screen, the words Sterling Vane burning in her mind. She shut the laptop with a snap and took a deep breath, her hands shaking. She couldn't afford to fall apart. Not now. She had to focus. But the more she thought about it, the more she realized how much Arthur's legacy had already seeped into their lives. Her sons had no idea who their father was. They had never asked, and she had never volunteered. They didn't need to know the truth about the man who had left them behind. Noah and Lily were hers, fully and completely. And she was their mother, their protector. The weight of her role pressed on her chest, and for the first time in years, she felt the full impact of her decision to leave Arthur behind. Had it been the right choice? She wasn't sure anymore. But she couldn't let her children be caught up in the drama of a father who didn't deserve them. She lay back, staring at the ceiling again, trying to quiet the storm that was rising in her mind. What now? She wondered. What do I do? But the question that lingered wasn't about what she could do. It was about what she had already done. Time doesn't heal all wounds. It just teaches you to hide them better. You think time heals all wounds? It doesn't. It just teaches you to hide them better. If you've ever buried a truth so deep, it scares you to remember. Stay with me. Zoride closed her eyes. The truth of her past and her present tangled together in a way she couldn't yet untangle. She knew one thing for sure. The past had never stayed buried for long. And now, with Sterling in the picture, the past was about to explode back into her life and the lives of her children. If you're listening right now, help me prove something wrong. My mother said I wouldn't even reach 1,000 subscribers, but I believe stories like this deserve to be heard. Help me show her that these tales matter. Zoride hadn't planned on going to the school that morning. The inspection was just an excuse. She needed to see it for herself to make sure she wasn't imagining things. The thought of her twins, Noah and Lily, with Sterling Vane, a stranger who looked exactly like them, still churned in her gut. The hallway of the academy was quiet as she moved through it, her heels clicking against the polished floor. She reached the robotics lab and paused behind the glass. There they were, Noah and Lily, huddled over a complex set of circuits and wires, laughing in that familiar way they did when they were in their element. And between them, standing so naturally that it was almost unnerving, was Sterling. The same high cheekbones, the same sharp eyes, a perfect mirror of her twins. Zoride's breath hitched, her pulse hammering in her throat. She felt rooted to the spot, her legs heavy. She couldn't tear her eyes away, as if some invisible force was holding her in place. And then, a voice, smooth, confident, and cold, cut through the moment. "He looks like them, doesn't he?" Zoride stiffened. She didn't need to turn around. She knew that voice. "Arthur." She slowly turned, her chest tightening. He was standing there, tall, immaculate in a tailored suit. He hadn't changed much. Older, maybe. More polished. But still the same. His eyes met hers, cold, calculating with just the faintest trace of regret. "Arthur," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The tension between them thickened, the world around them fading into nothingness. She felt exposed, vulnerable. There was no escaping it now. Zoride sat in the dim light of her apartment, staring at the old photograph on the table in front of her. It was a summer day in Santa Monica, sunlight glistening on the ocean, the air thick with the scent of salt and sand. She remembered the way Arthur had held her then, so sure, so confident, as if nothing could ever break them apart. Forever, he'd promised. The word had meant everything back then. She believed it. She had given him all of herself. But that was before everything had crumbled. Her fingers traced the edges of the photo, memories flooding back like waves crashing on the shore. She remembered the day she told him about the pregnancy, the way his face drained of color, the panic in his eyes, and then his words cutting deeper than any knife. I can't build an empire with a family tied to my ankles. He had left her then, without hesitation, without a second thought. He chose his empire, his future, over them. And she had left too. No goodbyes, no explanation. She packed up what little she had, leaving behind the life they'd imagined. Arthur's empire continued to grow, but her world crumbled. She raised Noah and Lily alone, her hands full, but her heart whole. She didn't need him. She would never need him. Until now. Zoride's heart pounded as she sat across from Arthur in the quiet cafe. His eyes were darker now, the arrogance softened by guilt. But it didn't matter. His words still rang in her ears. I didn't know about them, Zoride. I didn't know. Her voice was cold as ice. You chose your empire. You don't get to choose my children. The silence between them thickened. His regret didn't matter. Not anymore. Zoride tried to keep her composure as the days stretched on, but the weight of everything felt heavier than she'd ever imagined. Every morning she smiled at Noah and Lily, kissed them goodbye as they headed off to school, but inside her chest was a battlefield. She couldn't shake the image of Arthur standing in front of her at the academy, cold, distant, demanding. Her mind spun, unable to focus. She was living on the edge of a storm, one that could tear everything she'd built apart. Noah and Lily were perceptive, especially Noah. His usual chatter had slowed, and Lily, typically the more guarded of the two, had started asking questions. Mom, Noah asked one evening, as they sat at the dinner table, his eyes studying her carefully. Are you okay? You've been different lately. Zoride forced a smile, swallowing the lump in her throat. I'm fine. Just tired, that's all. But Noah wasn't convinced. Are you sure it's not because of him? She stiffened, her hand frozen midair as she reached for the salt. Who? She asked, trying to mask the panic in her voice. Dad, Lily chimed in, her small voice filled with innocent curiosity. You've been talking a lot about him lately? Why don't we ever see him? Zoride's heart clenched, but she couldn't avoid it anymore. The next day, the letter came. A lawyer. A request for a DNA test. The walls around her started crumbling. That night, as she tucked Noah into bed, he found the envelope in her bag. He opened it before she could stop him. They stared at the paper for what felt like an eternity before Noah's voice broke the silence. This is about Dad? Zoride's throat burned as she exhaled, the truth she'd buried slipping out in a choked whisper. Your father's name is Arthur Vane. He didn't want a family then. I never told him about you because I wouldn't let him choose when to care. The silence between them was deafening. Some secrets protect the people you love. Others destroy them. If you've ever lied to save someone's heart, this story's for you. Zoride sat at the kitchen table, the envelope in front of her like a ticking bomb. Her hands trembled as she tore it open, the cold paper feeling like a 1,000-pound weight pressing against her chest. She unfolded the results and scanned the page. The words were clear, the letters unmistakable. Arthur Vane is the biological father. She couldn't breathe. The paper blurred as tears pooled in her eyes. Her fingers clenched around the edges, but it didn't stop the shaking. She had known, of course. Deep down, she had known. But seeing the cold, undeniable truth written in black and white, he was their father. Arthur Vane, the man who had abandoned them, who had left her to raise their children alone. The man who, despite everything, had never once asked about his sons. She closed her eyes, fighting the wave of emotion that threatened to drown her. It wasn't supposed to be like this. She had spent 12 years protecting them from this truth, from the man who hadn't wanted them. But now, there was no turning back. The phone rang. She glanced at the screen. Arthur's name flashed. Her heart skipped. She answered on the second ring. Zoride. His voice was softer this time, more subdued than she'd ever heard it. I need to see them. I need to meet my sons. Sterling deserves to know his brothers. Her breath caught. She had promised herself she wouldn't let him worm his way back in. But here they were. The inevitable moment had come. She took a long, steadying breath. One meeting. On my terms. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across Riverside Park as Zoride stood at the edge of the water, watching the ripples stretch out across the surface. She felt the weight of the moment pressing against her chest. Heavy, suffocating. Beside her, Arthur stood quietly, his eyes fixed on the horizon. Neither of them spoke. She glanced over at him. He seemed smaller somehow, stripped of the arrogance he once wore so effortlessly. The man who had once seemed untouchable now stood before her, vulnerable and lost. The sound of footsteps drew her attention. Noah and Lily approached, holding hands, their faces a mix of uncertainty and bravery. The tension was thick in the air, and Zoride could feel her heart beat louder as they came closer. The twins stopped a few feet away, their eyes scanning Arthur with cautious curiosity. Arthur cleared his throat, his voice shaking. I'm your father. Noah and Lily exchanged glances. There was a long, pregnant silence before Lily spoke, her voice soft, but full of an emotion that Zoride knew too well. Hurt, confusion, and the sting of abandonment. Why didn't you choose us? Arthur's gaze dropped to the ground, and for the first time, Zoride saw the cracks in his composed exterior. His eyes welled with tears, but his voice was steady as he answered, his words filled with regret. Because I was a coward. I thought success would make me whole. But I've never felt emptier than I did without you. The weight of his confession hung in the air. Zoride's throat tightened as she watched her children process the truth, their faces torn between anger and sorrow. Noah turned to her, seeking guidance. She met his gaze, her eyes soft but resolute. It's their choice now. The following week, Zoride stood at the entrance of Arthur's mansion, her breath caught in her throat. The sprawling estate in Beverly Hills was a far cry from the life she'd built in her small, quiet apartment. The house was pristine, immaculate, everything she had never wanted but feared would be thrust upon her now. Inside, Sterling waited. Her mind raced as she glanced at Noah and Lily, who stood beside her, their eyes wide with awe. The sight of the mansion, the polished floors, the opulent decor, was like stepping into a different world, one she had long since shut out. They walked through the grand hallway, and there he was, Sterling. He stood awkwardly at the far end of the room, his hands shoved in his pockets, his eyes flicking nervously between the twins. The initial silence was thick and uncomfortable, like the air had been sucked from the room. Then Noah cracked a small smile, and Sterling hesitated before returning it. Slowly, the tension began to ease as laughter filled the space, hesitant at first, then growing more comfortable. Sterling's dry humor matched Noah and Lily's, and Zoride couldn't help but notice how much they all shared. Across the room, Josephine stood, her arms crossed, her eyes observing with grace but distance. Zoride couldn't help but feel her presence, elegant, untouchable. She seemed like a part of this world, a world Zoride didn't quite belong to. Arthur approached her, his voice low. I lost you once. I won't lose them too. Zoride turned to him, her eyes steady. Then don't prove it with words, Arthur. Prove it with time. Months had passed since that afternoon in Riverside Park, since the day Arthur had stepped back into their lives. Noah and Lily were flourishing. They spent weekends at Arthur's estate, enjoying the luxury of a life they never expected. But Zoride wasn't as sure. She watched her children with a bittersweet ache, seeing them embrace the father they never knew. In the quiet moments, when the house was still and her thoughts were too loud, doubt crept in. Could a man who had broken her trust so completely really stay this time? Could he rebuild the family he had walked away from? Zoride wrestled with the weight of these questions every day. She had kept them safe, loved them fiercely, but now, watching them split their time between two worlds, her heart ached with a quiet fear. What if it wasn't enough? What if Arthur couldn't truly change? One night, just as the sky darkened with the last remnants of twilight, a knock echoed at her door. She opened it to find Arthur standing there, not in his usual suit, but in a simple pair of jeans and a sweatshirt. The sight was jarring, vulnerable, almost painfully human. I built everything, he said quietly, his voice carrying the weight of something unsaid, but I forgot what home felt like. Zoride didn't answer. She couldn't, not yet. She just stepped aside, opening the door wider, giving him the space he'd asked for. Not as a lover, but as a father. The man who wanted to be in their lives. As they moved inside, Zoride watched Noah and Lily laughing in the living room with Arthur. The wall she had built around her heart cracked just a little. Some stories aren't about perfect endings. They're about forgiveness that hurts, healing that takes time, and love that survives anyway. If you felt that, you belong here. Zoride whispered to herself, watching her children. Maybe some truths are meant to find you again. Thank you for watching this story to the end. If you enjoyed this story, you will surely love the next one. It's as crazier and more intriguing as you can ever imagine, so do check it out. Click on the image showing on your screen right now to watch the next one.